minutes.
Okay, everybody, it's gone 4 o'clock, so we're going to get started. So just a couple of reminders of the ground rules is just to ask everybody, if you're not talking, just to go on mute. Everybody can mute and unmute themselves. There is a live transcript feature as well on Zoom, which you can turn on or off easily if you're on a laptop. It's a little harder to turn it off if you're on an iPad or an iPhone or something. But you can also change the size of the lettering that appears at the bottom. And so with that, I'll kick us off. I'll welcome everybody to yet another Zoom meeting. We were talking a little while ago about how long we'll continue that. Later, we'll maybe do a poll of everybody here to see how comfortable we are getting back in person. But today is on Zoom, and I'll throw up here on the screen the agenda for today's meeting that hopefully everybody saw in the newsletter or the email that went out. And so the plan is that we'll kick off here with Cody Petterson. We'll talk a little about the San Diego County Redistricting, that process for about 15 minutes as what we call our appetizer for the meeting. But then the entree, the main course, is the discussion of Afghan refugees, both nationally and at a local level. And we've got 3 great speakers, Homayra, Aleena, and Mejgan, lined up for that. Then we'll do a little bit of club business. And at the end is when we'll have the candidates that are running for office, representatives of elected officials talk to us. And then a little bit, we'll talk at the end about next month's meeting. So with that, do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll move to approve the agenda, John.
That's great. Thanks, Kip. And a second.
I second it.
That's great. Thank you. And then any discussion? Anything we need to change? I know in the running order, we're going to ask Homayra to go first on the main entree bit, simply because she needs to run away afterwards. But otherwise, everybody okay? No changes? Okay, and we'll take a vote just by saying, are there any objections to the agenda? And hearing no objections, we shall assume that it's approved. And with that then, Cody, I'd like to kick off. You're a club member for a long time, known to a lot of folks here, as previously as the president of the San Diego Democrats for Environmental Action, but here to talk about the county redistricting effort.
All right, thank you. It's good to sort of quasi see everybody here. I can't wait till we're back in our home location. That's probably the best club location of any club location in the county. So look forward to getting back to it. I just want to, I'm Cody Patterson. I work for Supervisor Lawson here, but I want to clarify, I also I lecture at UCSD as well. I want to clarify that I'm here tonight just as like a private citizen. Tara's involved, Supervisor Lawson is involved in various ways. If you ask her what she thinks of the redistricting, she'll tell you. The county council has approved, if she wants to participate, she can, but in general, she's been laying off. I, however, am sort of passionate about these things. I've been doing land use and environment and coastal issues and climate change issues for the last too long, 6 years. And so I kind of got to be in my bonnet on this thing. So I've been working on this thing, but my opinions on this perspective are my own. I do this on my off time. And you'll see that it's predominantly, the truth is about the supervisor will run in a friendly district one way or another, whether she runs in this district the current one that she won by 16 points or some other one, she'll basically be very well positioned. So she's not that concerned about the way the district looks. I, however, want a district that reflects my values and I believe our shared values. So with that, I'll get into the discussion. I'll try to move as quickly as possible. There's a lot. I mean, we could talk for 40 minutes about this thing, but I'll be as brief as humanly possible. John, if I can I share my screen?
Yeah, I'll make you a co-host, Cody, and then you can. Yeah,
great.
Just 1 second.
I have a PowerPoint, and then I'll switch over to Google Earth. I'm like a Google Earth fanatic. I spend far too much time on Google Earth, but here we go. I will now attempt to share my screen. I'm going to initially share, I guess, the entire screen so that I can. Yeah, that's what I'll do. I'll share my entire screen, and I will go to Microsoft PowerPoint, and then I will begin the slideshow. So can everyone see that?
Yep.
All right. So this is the current district setup. You can see there is District 2 is your basic classic rural conservative district. It's where Anderson is now. District 5 is an interesting district. It's sort of transitioning to a much more blue. It's purple, and it's transitioning. And depending on what happens with District 5, it will become a district that's positive for Democrats or pretty neutral. It's currently held by Desmond. You can see District 3 down here, all advanced here. You can see the roads and everything. Again, there's a rural dividing line, which is basically past the 15. If you look at the line of District 3, I'm going to switch to a simplified map to talk about it. So you can see there's a pretty clear rural divide in San Diego that, you know, it goes along where my cursor is, and to the right, it's pretty rural. But you can see what happened in the last time. They gave sort of District 1 a chunk of the South Coast, and they put District 4. And then they did this crazy gerrymandering with District 3, mostly because Horn wanted to take Rancho Santa Fe away from Pam Slater Price. I mean, straight up, that's the kind of absurdity that was involved in the last time around. So they basically like tried to swap a bunch of stuff and gave District 3 Escondido, and then they took Rancho Santa Fe. So obviously, whatever happens, we'll hope the IRC, Independent Redistricting Commission, will correct that insanity. So the other thing to keep in mind with regard to the county is the county has land use and sort of sheriff's purview. Very large part of its purview has to do with the unincorporated county, and that's the white portion here. Those are all the portions of the county that have not been incorporated. And given the challenges with incorporation, it's very unlikely you'll see further incorporations. There's some islands here, and here by Rancho Santa Fe down here, and some by San Dieguito. But by and large, the East County is unincorporated, and most of the West Coastal County is incorporated. And then you see Pendleton up here as well. There is a peculiarity with we passed the last cycle. We passed a proposition or a measure that set several county-specific parameters on this. You have to have 3 districts with unincorporated, some unincorporated, and you have to have 2 districts that are, in terms of area, are predominantly unincorporated. So there is an independent redistricting commission, which was established, and so it is very much independent. It operates independently. In the past, the supervisors sort of made the decision, and they hashed out these weird deals, and that's basically what led to the gerrymandering around Escondido and Rancho Santa Fe last time around. The criteria that they have to follow are the county, and this is based on state and federal law, and that is they have to have districts that are roughly the same size in terms of population, and you figure there's 3.4 million people in the county, so that's districts of about 700,000 people. They have to be contiguous, so you can't have weird islands. They have to be geographically compact, and that's to discourage, obviously, strange gerrymandering. And honestly, D3 right now is on the edge there. You want to minimize division of cities, census designated places, communities of interest, and neighborhoods. And so I'll talk a little bit as I walk through it about what that means in terms of breaking it down. And you ideally have to have easily identifiable boundaries that follow natural or artificial barriers. And that's to make districts that kind of make sense to community members. And then it has to comply with the Voting Rights Act. There's both the Federal Voting Rights Act and our California Voting Rights Act. Both of these, in general, there's been a lot of litigation, and I'm not an attorney, elections attorney, but basically both Voting Rights Act generally prohibit dilution of racial, ethnic, or other protected classes. And the CVR, the California Voting Rights Act, explicitly prohibits any districting that impairs. Hold on one second. Whoa. Oh, let me go back on this. Let me go here. That's okay, we'll get there. That impairs the ability of a protected class to elect candidates of its choice or its ability to influence the outcome of an election. Now, I'll switch over to Google Earth real quick. I'm trying to move as quickly as possible here. I'm going to switch over to Google Earth here and walk you through a little bit. The main thing that means, that last element, is that in a district which you could reasonably expect a particular protected class to have a majority or have a very good chance of electing a candidate or an elected official, you can't tip it, you can't reduce, you can't dilute it in such a way that it would give it less political power than it might be expected to have. And so the main way that that's going to affect our map is almost certainly you're going to have, can folks see that?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to zoom in on this a little bit here. I'm going to try to minimize that. And if you see this right here, I'm going to move it to the side. This is almost certainly you're going to see a, whoa, too much. You're going to see a D1 that is maybe a border district. There are a lot of people producing maps. I have not had direct interaction with any of them, but I've been listening to the testimony and tallying the testimony. And so I can see the way that it's going. There is a lot of testimony asking for a southern border district. I mean, there's at least 20, 25 e-comments every single time they meet, and without Point Loma and Coronado, explicitly asking not to have that. There's a perception, particularly in the Latino community, that D1 has been, that they've drawn their officials from those communities, and they've sort of dominated a region that is predominantly Latino. So there's a lot of concern about having Point Loma and Coronado in District 1. And there's a lot of demand for it to be a border district. That would produce a district that is majority Latino. And that would be consistent with the Voting Rights Act. The rest of the districts, there's some arguable things about D4 we'll talk about briefly. The other parameters that are going to be set by this map, there is also, if you're following, and so like I said, I tally the comments. There are a lot of comments coming. Next, I'll do D5. There are a lot of comments that are coming out of D5 requesting for there to be a 78 corridor district. And that would basically be, I'm going to show you this little thing here. Carlsbad, Oceanside, Vista, San Marcos, Escondido. Presumably you'd have Pendleton in there too, although that's not frequently said. So you can see that that would be a District 5 that's close. I mean, I'm just adding up the populations of various cities. It's close to 690,000 people. So the Republicans would like a District 5 that either remains the same. I can see that they have coalitions because they put in 52 comments on the last meeting, that they want it basically to not change, but they basically want the rural and the coastal to stay together. Pretty clearly, some of the commenters kind of deviate from the talking points. They're clearly working off talking points. There's some talking points where they're basically asking it because they think the Democrats are going to break it up. I think there's some real reality. If you look here at the 78, here's the 78, it cuts right through there. That is a social and economic, that is a community of interest in the sense that the law stipulates that a community of interest is a socially or economically integrated community. And I think there's a very strong, if you've ever spent time in North County, there's a very strong argument that is the 78 and the Sprinter line really do unify that region. And then probably you're going to get a D2 that basically like takes in the parts of the East County that are basically not taken in by D1 and D5. And then, so one of the things I've been advocating for, and again, I will reiterate, I'm advocating this as an environmentalist, not as a staff member. This is what I believe in. Doing climate action work and ocean protection work and stormwater work, sea level rise. I really think it's important to have a coastal district that sort of advances. What I think is best is to have a min-max solution where you have a coastal district where you have a champion. And this is what, I mean, it's something like this. I could get into sort of more fine-tuned stuff, but it's something like this that goes, basically fills in the lines between the D1 and D5. And it goes from Encinitas, well, basically to Coronado. I mean, Coronado's kind of doesn't really fit in any district. It's kind of its own thing, but I think probably given the testimony that's coming out of D1, you would probably have Coronado involved. You can see this is basically a 5 freeway, 56 feeds in, and the 52 feeds in, and it cuts along the 805. I think there's a very strong argument. I have my own political sense in terms of my ideology, what I want to be prioritized, but I think there's a very good argument that this is a cultural world. If you look demographically at Point Loma, and you look demographically, culturally, values, how they vote, Point Loma, Encinitas is like a northern Point Loma, or vice versa. They're very similar. They share values. I think most of this district is unified by the 5. If you're coming off Carmel Valley, if you leave your house, you're probably going to the 5 on the 56. This is certainly, as a born and raised La Joyan, this is like, my territory when I was growing up. This is the limits of my little narrow world as a 8-year-old or whatever. So anyhow, I would advocate that. And for my own purposes, it's a min-max solution in the sense that you get a champion for coast and climate, and you get 2 additional votes that have some coastal exposure. So you can put 3 votes together, which is your all important fact on the Board of Supervisors. Now I'll close here. I started a little late, so I think I can have a couple more minutes here, and then I'll be done at 4:22 or something.
Yep, that's great.
What's going to be a challenge, and again, there's several coalitions that are working on this. I see the comments coming in and I hear like sort of chatter. There's some debate on what D4 is going to look like. And I say this because D4 has the potential to become a majority minority district. It has the potential to actually have, if you map it in such a way that the coast is if you have, so I don't know, there's something like 42, 45% white San Diegans. I think it's 30 something Latinos, 12% Asian Americans, somewhere around a little above 5% African Americans. If you peanut buttered those ethnic groups across the county, you would have a plurality of sort of white folk everywhere in the county. So you have to move, by the way you draw borders, you have to move some of those white populations together to raise the percentage in some districts, and in order to raise the percentage of minority groups and others to give them more political representation. That's obviously a personal value for me. I'm not saying that's a Voting Rights Act. It's arguable whether a majority minority is itself a category as opposed to just the groups themselves. But if you had a D4 that moved up the 15 and captured Kearney Mesa, Linda Vista, Mira Mesa, Rancho Penasquitos, or at least South Rancho Penasquitos, those are a lot of high percentage of Asian Americans. If you had a D4 that moved up from City Heights, you would get the City Heights populations of Asian American API community, and you would unify those with the Asian American communities to the north of the 8. Alternatively, you could create a D4 that moved southeast and drove up the percentage of African Americans higher. You could have a sort of a community that's kind of in the middle, and it probably doubled. It probably could get your API up to 20% from 12 and your African American up to 10% from 5. Or you could go southeast and maybe drive up your percentage to 12% African American, 13%, and not get quite as many API. That is going to be a very active debate. Let me say in closing, this is like the kind of thing that I'm thinking through in terms of like building it with communities. And I've actually gone through, and I said before that you can break this, you shouldn't break up communities. If you look at the community plans and you know your neighborhoods, I'm going to give you just an example on D3. If you build it from like Encinitas, put Encinitas in there. Let me take away these maps. Hold on. This is the last thing I'll do right here is show you how it would look as an example, how it would look. Hold on. My computer's freezing up. Okay. As an example, what it would look to build up a community, build up a map from the communities. Encinitas. Okay. Carmel Valley. Let's not break up that. Rancho Santa Fe, the Bridges, Olivenhang, Mission Bay, Coronado, Ocean Beach, Mission Beach, Pacific Beach, La Jolla, Solana Beach, Point Loma, Del Mar, Cabrillo National Monument, Torrey Pines State Park, Naval Base, Elfin Forest, Fairbanks Ranch, Mount Israel, Harmony Grove, Del Dios. See what I mean? You can build up these communities. You don't want to break up communities. You can't based on the law. So you'd have to break it along communities or of interest or community, actual neighborhoods or census tracts. But you can get a picture of a district that looks that looks frankly a lot like this map. I sort of like, you can see this is sort of like a map that's how I thought of what D3 might look like by building up communities. So anyhow, you're going to get a lot of interesting things out of D4. I'm looking forward to hearing about what that's like. I hope this club, given the importance of coastal issues, this club, that it could consider backing a coastal map. Also, the other side to bear in mind that if we don't get behind one of these maps that prioritize our values, this kind of a map, which frankly would, I think, serve our values well, and it's very reasonable, it's rooted in our actual communities, you are likely there's a possibility that commission will just go with like a D2 that takes the east and then north, just east-west blocks, in which case those things will take in very, very liberal coastal communities and Poway, right? It'll take in very liberal coastal communities down here and then pull an El Cajon. So if we don't have a map that actually corresponds to the communities we live in, we could, and we don't advocate strongly for it, we could end up with a map that is basically just very rote and creates very moderate or even conservative districts. So anyhow, I appreciate it. John, is that kind of what you guys were looking for, and gals?
Yeah, no, thank you, Cody, very much. And this is just a taster or an appetizer, if you like. One, to kind of get everybody up to speed on what's going on. And then two, if you're able to stick around to the end of the meeting, Cody, if you don't have to rush off, I'm sure we can follow up with questions kind of after the formal meeting closes, and decide how we want to, get more involved going forward.
And I'll share links in the chat of the timeline, because there'll be the commission will meet twice a month for the next, until December 15th is the deadline that they have to have the map. So they'll start to have some springboard maps that are not drafts, but they're kind of to jog people's thoughts. There'll be an application that comes out tomorrow, so you can start making your own maps, which will be very cool. So I'll put that in the chat.
Excellent. That was great. Thank you so much. Okay, and with that, we'll switch straight then. I know Homayra, who's here with us today, has to head off in a little bit here. So Homayra, I will spotlight you on the screen. So now everybody's attention up first. And I was going to say, I could introduce you, or I could let you do a little brief introduction yourself, if you like. I put something in the newsletter that went out to folks, but I should mention Homayra and I'm on the board of PANA, of which Homayra acted as the executive director while Rama Saeed was out on maternity leave, and did a wonderful job, absolutely outstanding, and is the deputy executive director for PANA. So Homayra, yeah, just take a minute or two just to give us a little bit, and then it's all yours. Yeah.
Happy to. Thanks so much, John, and thanks for inviting me into the space today. Like John said, I am the Deputy Director at PANA. For those who aren't familiar with the organization, it stands for the Partnership for the Advancement of New Americans. We are a nonprofit organization located right here in San Diego, and we fight to advance the full economic, social, and civic inclusion of refugees. We work at the local, state, and federal level. Our organization was founded by refugees, and we use relational organizing as a means to build political power within our communities. I myself am Afghan. I was born in Afghanistan. I came to the United States when I was 5 years old. So, my history is in policy, primarily within immigrant rights movement. And I used to work for the ACLU and have been with this organization for about 2 years. Right now we're seeing so much happening, right? With the Haitians who are seeking asylum at our borders, and everything, that's been happening with the administration instituting what is it called, deportations and all of that, and we're seeing what's happening within Afghanistan, and it's really important for us to look at this humanitarian crisis that's unfolding in Afghanistan, not necessarily in a vacuum. The Trump administration, as we all know, really instated just an era of anti-immigrant policies. Not only did the administration pass policies at the border, which we are all really well aware of, but they also really decimated the refugee resettlement program. Between 2016 and 2020, we saw that our the refugees that were coming into the country were actually decreased by 86%. And so, in the midst of all of this, not only were the number of refugees coming really sharply decreased, but also really the infrastructure for refugee resettlement was really decimated over the past several years. and really brought it down to like its bare bones. And to make things worse, there's a global pandemic that we all know exacerbated existing inequities that exist within our society. And with all of this happening, watching what's been happening in Afghanistan, for those of us who care, who have families there, who've been involved much more than the past couple of months, we'd been hearing about the pullout from Afghanistan for multiple years now. However, I think our hope with the Biden administration coming in was that there would be renewed humanitarian efforts into the country, and with the potential pullout that the administration would ensure the safety of those who are most vulnerable in the country. This past spring, there was legislation that was passed that would prioritize special immigrant visas and try to speed up that process. And special immigrant visas, I'm not sure how familiar folks are with this. So if I'm being too rudimentary, please let me know. But those are the folks who've basically been working with the military in one way or another over the past 20 years of this war. And so, we were hoping that there would be a sped up process for this. However, for a number of reasons that did not happen. And in July, there was word that, the Afghan government looked like it was falling, and there was this increase of evacuations. When the government fell in mid-August, it was really clear to all of us that there was thousands and thousands of U.S. citizens, green card holders, SIVs, and really vulnerable communities who were still trapped inside of Afghanistan. It took an immense amount of pressure for the administration to allow folks who had not been through this whole very, very elongated process. For folks who aren't familiar with the refugee resettlement process, it is one of the most vetted programs we have that exist in this country. And so the administration allowed for this other humanitarian parolees to come into the country, given the crisis that was unfolding. However, this is really unheard of in many ways. I mean, we saw it post-Vietnam and the Cuban crisis, but, not necessarily within modern times. And so we are dealing with this, very politically volatile situation in the midst of very, very, very complicated immigrant rights law. And what the situation currently looks like is there's roughly about 48,000 people who are on bases throughout the country. The vast majority of these folks, some of them are special immigrant visa holders, but many of them are humanitarian parolees as well. Humanitarian parolee status is a temporary status. The administration, usually this is like, for example, if I have if I'm dying or I have some kind of emergency and someone is going to come and visit me, and they're going to visit me for a short amount of time, that this is like a very temporary status that's given to people. In this case, it was extended to about 2 years. And with the way it is currently looking, every single person who's coming here and as a humanitarian parolee will have to actually apply for adjustment of status within the first year of arriving here. And, what that looks like and what that process is going to look like is really depends on what legislation is passed. Right now, it's really uncertain what that looks like. I know that Aleena and Mejgan are here, and they're going to kind of go over a lot of what we're seeing at the bases. There's a lot of issues, with having 48,000 folks here at military bases that weren't really meant to house this number of people. There's issues in terms of food, in terms of cultural competency. There are children who are unaccompanied who are also here. And so there's been, a large number of problems happening at the bases, but what we'll soon be seeing in the next couple of weeks is that these folks will be resettled across the country. In San Diego, we have 4 resettlement agencies. We are one of the, most robust refugee communities in the world. That's why my family is here. That's why Aleena, Mejgan, other folks are here. That's why PANA exists, is because we're such a bright community here. However, as we all know, we're also one of the communities that are facing a housing crisis. And so we have been really looking at PANA as to how do we continue to be a vibrant community that welcomes immigrants, that welcomes refugees, but also ensures that once they come here, they're able to really thrive and rebuild their lives in the United States. So for that has looked like us doing a lot of advocacy. At the local, state, and federal level. We have been pushing for there to be an adjustment of status. Like I said, hopefully a blanket adjustment of status, because for folks who are familiar with immigrant rights law, I mean, it can take up to 8 to 10 years to get asylum in this country. Right. That means that a lot of folks who might get initial benefits might be tapped out of benefits by the time that they are actually able to adjust status. So we are asking for a complete blanket of adjustment of status for everyone, also so that they don't have to pay thousands and thousands of dollars in legal fees in order to adjust their status. We've also been advocating for, like I mentioned, like the cultural competency that needs to exist within the bases. We've been working to really push hard for housing. I will link one of the reports that we actually released at PANA in February, where we interviewed 544 refugees who currently live in San Diego. And we asked them, what are the main issues that you all are facing? We talk about housing, we talk about jobs, we talk about education and health. And the number one thing that consistently comes up for refugees is the lack of safe, affordable housing. And so, refugees aren't able to come here with their houses. Unfortunately, they're literally coming in fleeing for their lives and having to start from the ground up, usually with no language abilities. They aren't able to bring their savings with them, nothing, right? Most of them just come with the clothes on their backs. And so for PANA, we're really pushing for refugees to have housing included as part of their resettlement package. A lot of people think that, well, refugees are taken care of, and at least for their first 3 months, and that's just not the case. Even the flights that refugees take regularly from coming from another country, that is a loan that they have to then repay. And oftentimes it takes families 20 years to repay the loan that it took them to arrive into the United States, right? In addition to that, the money, the welcome money that they receive, that's like the resettlement and placement funds. In San Diego, that will basically amount to your first month's rent. Because for folks to be able to actually come here, they also have to pay to find housing, they have to pay for their security deposit. They don't have credit history, right? They don't have a cosigner that has a job that can prove that they have that, like 3 months of 3 months of rent in their income and all of those things. So finding affordable housing and safe, affordable housing continues to be the main issue. And so we're really advocating for there to be more robust investment in refugees so that they're able to thrive when they come here. Some of the other work that we're working on is legal advocacy for many families like my own. I have family in Afghanistan who are at risk of losing their lives because they have worked with the United States government, because they've worked for women's rights groups, things like this. And so we are supporting some families in applying for humanitarian parole applications. PANA, as well as many other organizations, has been asking the administration for a fee waiver because it costs $575 per individual just to apply for a humanitarian parole application. So for many of our families, we have large families. So for a family of 7, that means that just to apply for this is costing $4,000. And so we're really asking for, if not a waiver, for some kind of expedited process so that folks can, be able to seek humanitarian paroles for their families still in Afghanistan and not have, really the fees being an issue. As I mentioned, unless legislation is passed, every single parolee that's going to be resettled in San Diego is going to need an attorney to support them with their legal case. And so at PANA, we do have an attorney, and we anticipate being able to support them through this process, but recognize that that's just one, drop in the bucket, as they say. We're going to need a really robust legal support in order for these refugees who came in as parolees to be able to adjust status. Some of the things that you all can do is really, elevating the calls to action that are coming from Afghan American organizations and Afghan American leadership. So I named a couple of them. There is an appropriations bill that folks probably are aware of right now. Within that, there is actually additional funds in order to support refugee resettlement. And we are asking everyone to please, 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 call your legislator and ask for that to be included, so that the incoming humanitarian parolees are able to receive ORR benefits, so that they're actually able to rebuild their lives. Again, the housing thing continues to be an issue. This is something that we continue to bring up, but recognize that there's going to be some long-term investment that needs to happen there. And then lastly, we're in San Diego. We're anticipating hundreds, if not thousands of refugees resettling here over the next year. So please reach out to organizations and to folks who are on the ground supporting these communities. At PANA, we have a mutual fund that we have established. This funding will be literally checks that 100% of what is raised goes right back to the incoming refugees. So I will post the link for that and really urge you all to support as much as you're able to, and as well as these other great folks and organizations who are here to talk about this issue. But I'll stop there.
No, Homayra, thank you so much. That's good. And yeah, please go ahead and post the link that you mentioned to the PANA group. And I know you had to run away because you've got several other important things going on today. So if it's okay, we'll let you go. Thank you again for coming. And then we can move on with Aleena and Mejgan, and they can answer questions, I'm sure. And if not, we can follow up with you if people have questions specifically.
Awesome, thank you. So I just linked the mutual aid. This is actually being established by our PANA Youth Congress. So these are our youth who are leading the way for this fund to be created. And then I'll also post the article the report that I mentioned earlier. But thank you all so much for your time.
Yeah, no, Homayra, thank you again. And with that, I shall now pass the spotlight to Aleena.
Hey everyone, my name is Aleena June. Can I share my PowerPoint, please?
Yes, absolutely. I just this second made you a co-host, Aleena, so you can go ahead.
Okay. Let me know if y'all can see my PowerPoint.
Yep, we can see it now.
All right. All right, so Homayra did an excellent job talking about the policies and what we can do to help the Afghan people. So I'm going to share a very personal story with everyone here about my family and some other folks that was attached with my family as they were passing the gates of Afghanistan. So in 2018 to 2019, my father was abducted in Afghanistan by the very radical portion of the Taliban regime. Back then, they were not a regime, they were just ragtag, but now they are the government. He was abducted, and then 2021, my father decided to go back for a farewell visit to Afghanistan. And my father, he has Alzheimer's, so he has to be escorted. He always needs someone with him. So my brother on the left, he helped my father go to Afghanistan. He stayed with him for a while until we could find a person to take care of him. And my dad's on the right. Friday night, my father was supposed to get on the plane, come back home. the night that he was on the plane, he was removed from his flight because he still had his abduction alert active. When he was rescued in 2019, they kind of rescued him through the military, so he didn't go through the process of going through like regular airport. So therefore, his alert was still active. When he was being removed, he was going through a lot of anxiety, and when his anxiety kicks in, what happens is his Alzheimer also kind of, takes its own form. Therefore, he believed whatever the immigration officer said, and he assumed that his escort, who was supposed to bring him back to the States, was abducting him. So he ended up being in Kabul embassy that day. At the same time, while he was in the embassy, the Taliban had entered the city. And this is all happening in the middle of the night, like 12, 11, 1 a.m. And at the same time, people started panicking. This is in the middle of the night. That's when people started panicking because they just saw like Taliban's entering with guns. Just imagine Proud Boys coming into your city with guns, heavy tanks, and huge, what's it called? Those MAGA hats, red hats, just everywhere, and those Trump flags, and they're screaming and they're shooting and they're just entering your city. So that reaction made everybody very nervous. People started getting very scared. At that time, there was no security and the gates were unattended at the airport. So people were still not going to the airport, but things were getting, falling apart very fast. So in the morning of it, the gates was basically taken over by civilians. As you can see, they're running aside the airport and the airplane. And the military troops have been completely withdrawn at that time. We had some volunteers, less than 200 people volunteering. Most of those personnel were American troops. We had some FBI agents on the ground, other agents as well. There were so many departments that decided not to get on the plane. They just decided to stay and help out. They were all volunteers, every one of them, including the British, the Norwegians, the Italians. They all decided to volunteer. So they weren't not ordered to volunteer or help out. They were told to leave, but they decided to stay. Saturday morning, August 14th, Taliban took over most of Kabul and the country with no opposition. People saw like no one wanted to fight them. Activists, advocates, everyone who was a targeted group, whether they're religious minority, any kind of minority, they just decided to lock themselves inside their homes. They did not leave. And this was not planned, so no one really had an evacuation plan or a shelter plan, anything like that. They just all, locked themselves in. No one was going to the bank. No one was on the street. And the Taliban started putting checkpoints randomly, just everywhere, just everywhere. Even like 100 feet apart, they could see each other. There's just checkpoints. The U.S. and allied citizens, they had no access to the airport at that time, which means my dad, who's a U.S. citizen, and several allies who were also citizens of like France and other countries, they had no access to the airport. They didn't know how to get to the airport because first of all, there were checkpoints everywhere stopping you to get to the airport. And by the time you get to the airport, there's just a huge, massive crowd. So either way, you have to jump through these hoops of obstacles. And that same day, there was about 16 people who died in human stampede, and 40 children were separated from their families. This was also the same day that my dad and a couple of U.S. citizens, and they were all seniors, they were at the gate, and they saw like the stampede happening. They were injured during the stampede. They were immediately removed from the gate area. And the folks who were inside the gate, they were stuck there too. And when you go inside the gate, you think, oh, we're at the airport. There's access to food, water, bathroom, this, that. No, actually, it's a huge hangar. So you don't have access to anything. So if you're with your kids and your family, you don't have any food. You don't really have a bathroom access. You don't have anything. You're stuck there for like 20 hours, whatever hours. And people were trying to leave the airport too, because, most of those people who went inside the gate, they actually had tickets, but all of those flights were canceled immediately. And then some control happened, but again, there was still, everything was being run by volunteers. A lot of NGOs from outside the gate started kicking in, started volunteering too, to calm down the crowd, because they saw like so many deaths happening. They were happening, and they couldn't stop it. So they decided to calm down the crowd outside the gate, but it wasn't easy. Other folks, they went around the gate, climbing. They even started digging ground. They started going under the wall to get into the airport. Sunday morning, Taliban had fully control of Kabul at that time. They did maintain or manage to take over the gate situation, which kind of helped and kind of didn't help, because they came in with guns, stun grenades, tear gas, and whips. They just started whipping everyone, tasing people, and started just shooting in the air, but those bullets do fall and it lands on someone. So people were severely injured during their gate controlling. Several people were crying. A lot of children were hurt because of the exposure to chemicals. A lot of folks went into the hospital because of severe rash and exposure to heat and the chemical. It didn't help them at all in the situation. Then we had several agents, veterans, all the folks from the US. That's when I got involved as well. We kind of naturally formed a team of people, and we started helping with the evacuation process. I worked with NGOs across the gate, as well as the veterans within the gates, to help people cross. And then that's when Kirsten took an active role too, because we had database of how many Muslims we have living in San Diego. And then what I did was I made an announcement in a couple of group chats, and people started contacting me saying, I have my family stuck in Afghanistan and they're US citizens. So we were able to evacuate 147 families, and these are all American citizens. And with those American citizens, we had about like more than, I would say, close to 15 to 40 people that came with those American citizens. That's why like you have all of these camps in El Paso and New Mexico, and as well as Virginia. All these camps are packed with a lot of SIV people that came in with their families. NGOs and US allies by that time started working together. This is the first time they started communicating. And then over here on my left, you'll see how the Taliban came in with heavy armory, and the crowd just completely silenced. No one wants to mess with Taliban. You don't want to even remotely upset them. And then on the right, you'll see this is how crowded it is. And keep in mind, this is the pandemic. Today, I was helping out several people, and now I feel a little under the weather. I don't know if it's just me psychologically psyching myself out, or the fact that maybe I, caught a flu or something. But anyways, people just stand there for like almost or up to more than 10 to 14 hours, just standing there with briefcase, something holding to give them a sign that, hey, I'm an American citizen, please help me evacuate. These are US troops and allies troops. Yeah, these are American troops. And then by August 16th and all the way till now, to the end of the evacuation, August 31st, Afghans in desperation falls off the plane to death. I mean, again, these people went through the sewage to get into the airport to make sure they get out of the country. And by that time, 5,000 to 6,000 US troops arrived. Things did calm down, especially inside the gate, because inside the gate, like inside the airport, it was really insane. Like people would just break into the airplane, just saying, I'm not leaving. You have to take me with you. Or they'll hold on to the tire of the airplane just to get out of the country. Yeah. And then you can see people are just desperately trying to run away, and some folks fell off the airplane over there. So we had to come up with a route to get people out. So what we would do is tell them to go at night, have a flashlight, and point towards the U.S. military or allies military, and then we would tell them to go from one place to another place, and then you keep doing that flashlight, and then they'll realize, okay, this group needs to be evacuated. They have been already processed. We already have their IDs. Everything has been sent to us. So we process their paperwork, everything. And then we know that this is legitimately our group. And then we help them evacuate. Unfortunately, even with all of this, processing, everything that took place, you just still can't get to the gate because there's a huge crowd. That's the tricky part. It is like the gate. If you look to the right picture, you see this flag right there. You have to pass this flag. It's all the way there. And this is where we tell the folks to wait over here. And down here, it's sewage. This is not a river. This is sewage. It's really, yeah. So you have to go all the way there to get evacuated. And on my left, you'll see Talibans everywhere. You see how the crowd gets a lot more calm when the Talibans are walking around with guns. This is a Talib, a Talib, this is a Talib, this is a Talib. Some of the Talibs will have whips and they're just whipping people. It doesn't matter if you're not even evacuating, like you're just passing by, they'll whip you. It doesn't matter how old or young, whatever you are. And then eventually my family did manage to cross the gate. When they did, they put them in a pickup truck. They take them all the way to the airplane. They go to the airplane. As you can see, there was no space, so they took the chairs out. Even till the end, they took the chairs out, and they jam-packed everyone inside the airplane. People were sitting on the floor. And then the next day, right when my dad leaves Kabul, the bombing took place. And someone got a hold of our map, our route map, where we tell people to station in one place, then go to another place. So they see that route that you're following, then we know right away you're one of our people that we're supposed to evacuate. They actually blew up exactly those areas that we would tell them to wait. And this is on the left is a bus of Afghan refugees arriving to Virginia. They were really tired. Most of them had the same clothes on for like, I would say over 2 weeks. They're wearing the same clothes, no access to shower, anything. And they're just tired the whole time. And then this is when they got their paperwork, everything processed, and it will be decided what holding facility they'll go from Virginia. This is my sister, no resemblance, and Virginia. So she picked up my dad and his escort, who also happens to be one of his relatives, who's also a green card holder who comes here often to the US. My dad was very tired. By the time he came to the States, he could barely keep his eyes open. He was like in physical pain too, because he ran out of his medication. So he didn't want to complain about it, but we knew right away. Luckily, my sister had all his medication, everything ready for him. This is the condition of the holding facilities. This is in Qatar. It was very hot. It was about 106 degrees, normal. No AC, no fan, and everyone is just exposed. And remember, a lot of these folks fell in the sewage. When the crowd gets really insane and wild, people would fall in the sewage. So everyone is exposed to some level of bacteria. They didn't have much clothing or any carry-on or anything like that. These guys didn't have anything. They just came with what they had. That's why, like, when Homayra says things like, they can't afford it. They literally can't, because they didn't come with anything. They came with slippers and clothes. This is me. I went to Fort Bliss to visit the holding facility. I was given access to go inside to observe the facility. I wasn't allowed to take pictures and photos inside the camps, but I did take some pictures here and there. When I went there, there were a lot of children. So I asked them, what do they want? They said they wanted pizza. So I would go with like boxes of pizza, and my name was the pizza girl. So I was like, okay, I'll take it. So the food portion wasn't sufficient for the people. The Fort Bliss people, they weren't ready for this mass amount of people, especially because when I went there during the Labor Day weekend, when I went there was like about 20 camps. Each camp housed about 50 to 60 people. I didn't really count exactly, but I got like the gist of it within the camp. And it's not like they have separate rooms or there's like a curtain or anything. You have to request a barrier between yourself and the people. Most of the people, they didn't speak English, so they don't know how to request those materials. So by the time I left, there was like about more than 100 of those tents. So there was about 4,000 to 6,000 people. By the time I was leaving, there was about like 12 to 14,000. And when I asked the sergeant, how many people are you expecting? He said about 15. And it was interesting because when I would stand there, I watched how the process went. For example, the food process. How do you pick up your food? How long the line takes? So they used to take forever to get the food, but then they realized that a lot of the Afghan ladies, they didn't want to go up and stand in line. It's not culturally appropriate. So they would tell their men to get their materials for them. So then when, for example, when a man goes, picks up a food, they would just give him one package, not like for his kids and his wife. So then he has to go back in line, wait for another hour to pick up, everyone's package. For that reason, it became really long. Eventually, by the time I was leaving, they decided like, screw it, just give them all the packages they want. It's not like they're going to steal food. Where are they going to store it? So then it became faster and better. But the only thing was most of the Afghans are Muslims. So we have dietary restrictions. For example, we only eat halal. So when it's vegetarian food, they would put on the board halal food. So the military knew what was halal and non-halal. So everybody would stand in line. But if it's not halal, they would just put not halal. And you would see no one would stand in line. So therefore, they would only eat 2 meals a day or sometimes just 1 meal a day because they didn't want to eat it, which is also interesting because vegetarian is a lot cheaper than having meat products. This is the process over here. When they arrive to the US, they go to Dulles Airport. They get processed, and then they're sent to, like, for example, El Paso, Texas. They get their biometrics, they get their medical exams. Once they get all of this done, then they get their fingerprints, everything done. Then they go fly back to DC, and then they have an interview. They do an interview, everything is done. Then they go through the NGOs, for example, IRC, and then IRC, they find them a place to live. Unfortunately, the state of California and Virginia are completely tapped out. They can't accept any further refugees. That's what they said, but California is still accepting it. In fact, San Diego is expecting 4,000 to 6,000 refugees, Afghan refugees, in a matter of few months. So expect that. And then after the IRC, everyone helps the Afghans to resettle. Then they send them to the place of city or state that accepted them to give them housing, all the commodities they need. This is what we're doing at CARE San Diego. We're still helping a lot of Afghans. The issue with the Afghans who are in the holding facilities like El Paso, Texas, other areas, is that they haven't done their paperwork process. So we're doing their paperwork for them. We're doing a lot of pro bono work for them. We're doing it for free. And we also provide classes for families because we don't know exactly who is inside those, in the bases. We don't know who's in, especially like places like Qatar and Germany. We have no idea who's there. So when we find a family or relatives that contacts us saying, hey, I have relatives there, then we tell them, all right, let's go get your paperwork started. So we've been providing these classes. And in the beginning, there was like about, I would say 15 people, and it got packed very fast. Just like the airplane, people just started sitting on the floor saying, screw it, we're just gonna sit on the floor. We need to finish this paperwork. And then the other thing we do with CARE San Diego is we contact businesses that want to help out refugees who just arrived to San Diego. And the businesses, they donate product like, furniture, kitchenery stuff, anything. So yeah, so that's what we've been doing at CARE San Diego. We do a lot of the, oops, I meant to stop sharing screen. There we go. So we do a lot of the paperwork for the families. And the reason why is, for example, there is a family who's in limbos. They're stuck in third-party country, and they already have their green card, everything, but the process is taking forever in the U.S. side. Like everything has been approved. All the U.S. has to do is say, all right, you can get on a plane, come to the States. But they haven't done that. Therefore, they're being deported back to Afghanistan after they escaped the whole gate, everything. So there are 7 families who is looking into deportation back into Afghanistan. And within those 7 families, 3 of their relatives were actually military members and high-ranking military members who was already facing death threats by Taliban, saying that, oh, I remember this guy. He shot this member of my crew, this member of my crew. So right now we're trying to work with the State Department to just expedite their families to bring them in the US, or at least just send them to like Qatar, because they're not even in Qatar. These are a couple of issues that folks are facing, but we're hoping that once the humanitarian parole fee waves are, kick in, we can help more families, more families finish their paperwork and try to expedite them and get them out of these holding facilities so they're safe and sound with their loved ones. All right, any questions, or are we saving the questions to the end?
Yeah, no, Aleena, thank you so much. That was great images and explanation. And yeah, if you want to hold the questions to the end, we'll have Mejgan go next. So I'll replace the spotlight on her, and then we can keep the questions to the end. I think it's probably easiest, and then you can both kind of help answer them. So thank you again, and I'll swap Mejgan up next.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for having me and discussing this really critical issue. I am no stranger to the Point Loma Democratic Club, having worked for the San Diego County Democratic Party in 2008 on the Obama campaign. As a field director, I helped mobilize and train many, many people within the Point Loma Democratic Club. But I think the club has changed, and so has the awesome leadership. And so I just want to say thank you to John and everybody a part of this club for being here today and hearing us out in what's going on with Afghanistan. As Homayra and Aleena have already shared, it is a humanitarian crisis of epic proportions, and there is no more than just to look at the pictures that Aleena just displayed to really see the level of devastation towards our people. And if you can imagine being an Afghan American growing up in the United States, we have seen a continual decentering of Afghan voices when it comes to the 20-year war against Afghanistan. One of the things that we continue to see, even after this crisis, is people not centering the Afghan experience and the people who are Afghan American speaking to this crisis. The longest American war was had in Afghanistan, and Afghanistan had absolutely nothing to do with 9/11. And so it's critical to make sure that we support Afghan-led organizations and Afghan activists and advocates that continue to do this work. My name is Mejgan Afshan. I am the co-founder and executive director of Borderlands for Equity. It is a pro bono civil rights nonprofit based in La Mesa and serves San Diego County. We serve those who have been discriminated against on the basis of gender, race, religion, ethnicity, and sexual orientation. We are the only Afghan advocacy organization led and founded by an Afghan in San Diego County. So as an Afghan American, my experience and background is very extensive. I have been an active Democrat for almost 20 years. I started my experience in the Democratic Party registering voters in La Mesa and in the city of San Diego 20 years ago. And when I moved to San Francisco State to transfer for university, my last semester as a senior, I became the intern of then Mayor of the City and County of San Francisco, Gavin Newsom. And I went went on to be his confidential aide at the city and county of San Francisco, and eventually ended up working for Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi as her staff assistant and caseworker when she transitioned from a congressional member to Speaker of the House. And so I have a long history with the Democratic Party and serving our progressive values. And so it's very important as a civil rights advocate and civil rights activist that we understand that the Afghan community has been at the has been receiving the short end of the stick for more than 20 years. And so I want to say thank you to everybody that showed up to our peaceful candlelight vigil that we had several weeks ago for Afghanistan. Over 400 people showed up from our community, and that was a grassroots mobilization that we did in less than 48 hours of activism. And that night, our program wrapped up within the hour and ended by 7:30. I think a few of you were actually there. And so I just want to say thank you for being in solidarity with our Afghan people. But I stayed in Balboa Park until 10:30 that night when people were continuing to show up to ask for support and help. And so my co-founder and I, Susanna Rani, co-founded Borderlands for Equity to be able to provide pro bono legal services. We are an office that supports with civil rights as well as immigration processing. And so we have been working with our legal team here in San Diego, other individuals that have lent support to the Afghan community that are supporting our humanitarian parole. And these are immigration attorneys, as Aleena and Homayra brought up. It's very important to understand that immigration is a very particular type of law, and not everybody is qualified to do so. And so these cases are very sensitive because many of the families are mixed status families. As again, Homayra and Aleena pointed out, some of these families do have visa status. Some of them are green card holders. Some of them might be even American citizens. But because of the mixed status of their families, the situation is very difficult to kind of detangle. And so we've been working with our partners to make sure we have a good wraparound services to set in place the course for our Afghan community. In San Diego alone, we have thousands of Afghans that have resettled. As previous to my time as the lead advocacy and public policy person for CARE San Diego for 3 years, I worked for the International Rescue Committee and served hundreds of Afghan refugees, as well as Iraqi, Somali, Syrian, Kurdish, and Sudanese, even Burmese community members that were being resettled in City Heights and El Cajon. I was the first person that advocated for the IRC to provide services in El Cajon to the Afghan American community. I had to take a survey and I had to take a list of hundreds of people to be able to even offer one class. And once that started, we literally had thousands of people showed up after that. And so it's really important to understand that our community needs are very, very important, and the community does continue to grow. And so what we are asking for is support in continuing to put pressure on our Board of Supervisors and at the city level as well to make sure that Afghan American community members are prioritized. Because of the trauma that they have experienced coming from Afghanistan, we need to understand that, number one, housing is absolutely a human right. For a government to allow refugees to be resettled with the knowledge that there is no housing to provide for them, it is on a level of inhumane treatment. And we know that there's been a housing crisis for many, many years. And so we've been working with the Board of Supervisors, Supervisor Nathan Fletcher's office, as well as Supervisor Tara Larson-Remer and Nora Vargas to make sure to continue to try to do support in the housing sector for our refugees. We have also been advocating for the support of representation of Afghan refugees. There are no Afghan refugees that work at the city, the state, or the federal level serving the Afghan community in the government. And it is an outrage when you have cases in El Cajon where people are showing up to Social Security and being given Chaldean and Arabic speaking workers to translate Farsi and Dari and Pashto and other languages, it is an outrage, and it is irresponsible on the part of our government, because it needs to be addressed. Representation matters, and people need to be able to communicate in a language that they understand. Of course, it makes sense. And then, of course, there is also the issue of children. We know that there's many children that were separated from their families, and so that we are working with the Board of Supervisors office to make sure that they understand we can be able to expedite the services for people who are trying to become foster parents. And so, because Afghans have a similar culture, we are considered next of kin. And so hopefully we will be able to secure an expedited licensing program for our Afghan American community members to become foster parents to the children that were separated from their families until they are able to be reconnected with their families. And of course, we are also making sure to support all those who are doing direct services for the Afghan community. The Muslim Services Organization and many others that have been doing direct services with our refugee community for years are trusted voices in our community. We want to make sure to continue that support of the work that they provide and make sure people are not being taken advantage of, because as you all know, unfortunately, there are many people that during times of crisis will also take advantage of people. Instead of going to help them, they are taking advantage of them. And so we want to prevent that from happening and continue to support the organizations that we know are trusted voices in our community and trusted messengers. And so we have started an Ariana emergency fund for humanitarian parole. As was mentioned before, a humanitarian parole application begins at $575, which in some cases, these families have upwards of 10 to 12 members of their immediate family that they would have to apply for separately. And the need is overwhelming. So we want to be able to support that process, and we want to be able to have people apply. In San Diego alone, in just our organization, dozens and dozens and dozens of families have reached out to get support with their applications. Every Afghan that I know in San Diego, including my own family, has a relative and or entire family stuck in Afghanistan right now. And so it's critical for us. We owe our people in Afghanistan the right to seek refuge. And this administration must address this issue. It is a humanitarian crisis, much like what's happening with the Haitian community that showed up at the southern border. And we know that they are going to need humanitarian parole. This is a very similar situation, because we need to be able to expedite and make this cost effective for our families. And so that's what we've been doing at Borderlands for Equity, and we will continue to center the voices of our most marginalized people. Something that I would like to add for everybody's knowledge is that, in Afghanistan, the Taliban's #1 target is the Shia minority, whether they be a Hazara or whether they be a Shia. I myself am a part of the Shia minority in Afghanistan, and our organization is absolutely dedicated to making sure any marginalized peoples, especially those that are being targeted by the Taliban, are able to get out of the country. And those folks, including our women and children that are being targeted by the Taliban, are the most vulnerable. They are the #1 on the hit list. And so the atrocities that have happened in the past 20 years, some of which are mass genocide against the Shia Hazara community, as well as our Shia communities in other parts of Afghanistan outside of Kabul, they continue to happen. And the Taliban have put people on notice, saying in some examples, they have shown up to people's homes, knocked on the door and told them, in the case of one community member here in San Diego, they came to the door and told them, we know you have 4 daughters, we know you're Shia, and we're coming back for your daughters as soon as the international lens is taken away from what's happening in Kabul and what's happening at the airport. And they've already told people this. This is an open secret. This is nothing being hidden. And so I think it's really critical to support the work of legal organizations that are pro bono, that continue to serve our community. And I ask that you please support Borderlands for Equity. You're able to access our website at www.borderlandsforequity.org. It's Borderlands is spelled BORDERLANDS, equity, EQUITY.org. And our organization is called Borderlands for Equity is because we work towards building equity. And as all of you know, we live within the Borderlands region of the border. And that was very critical for us. And so, yeah, I can be able to answer more questions, and I would be glad to stay on to be able to also discuss my candidacy for La Mesa City Council, and ballots will be dropping in 8 days. And so I'm really excited to share that about our campaign as well. And so I'll put our link in the chat for anybody to be able to access, and feel free to reach out to us.
Mejgan, thank you so much. That was great. And then, yeah, and I know we're running a little bit late, but obviously this is a very important topic, both in the national lens, if you like, but also very much here in San Diego. So I want to give a little bit of time if there are questions from people. And if there are, yeah, if you want to raise your hand in the chat, which on Zoom you can either do from the reactions button on the newer Zooms or on the participants tab, or you can wave your hand wildly on the screen in front of you with your video on. I might spot you as well. So I'm just looking to see if there are. Well, there are no questions. So either you've explained everything so well that nobody has a question, or nobody can find the button on the Zoom. Michelle has her hand raised. Yeah, so Michelle, would you like to go ahead? I'll click the button to ask you to, there you go, you did it.
Yeah, thank you. I love that you did that. I just wanted to ask, currently at this point, is the way out primarily by land, or are people still being able to get out through the airport? And again, how central place for people that want to help to find out what is needed right this minute? Is it, is it furnishings? Is it, I'm sure money is always needed, but in addition to that, is it help getting people to school, transportation, those kinds of things? Is there a central location for that? And what is the situation still in terms of people getting out?
As far as people getting out, the evacuation has been extended, but just not like the U.S. troops are not going to evacuate like the way we did in the beginning before August 31st. The only way to get out of Afghanistan and have access to these statuses, you have to legally go to a third-party country. And there are countries that are giving e-visas. However, the flights are up to $10,000 one trip. That means a flight that's supposed to be like $100 to Pakistan is now $10,000. Majority of the families cannot afford that, even if their paperwork have been processed, even if they have been approved, even if they have a house sitting here waiting for them, they have to go to a third-party country. And $10,000 is a lot of money for someone who is in need of evacuation. So countries like India, Pakistan, they say, yeah, we want to help, but this is what they're doing with their flights. So I would like to request the international community to step in and say, hey, why are you charging these people who are facing humanitarian crisis with such ridiculous prices? So to answer your question, people can only fly out of the country by foot. No one recommends that because, again, there are checkpoints everywhere. And the Taliban has a process. The process is when you get accepted, they will come pick you up from your residence and they will check your paperwork that has been approved. And it's not been approved, then what happens, there's a likelihood that you'll get beat up. And there was a case, a recent case, someone from LA had reported, my good friend Spujme, she's an immigration attorney, that one of her clients received a phone call saying that go to the airport, all your paperwork, everything has been approved. They went to the airport. When the Taliban saw that their paperwork was not approved, it was actually a prank call. They actually shot that man in the spot. And unfortunately, he died from that injury. This is the case. So if your paperwork is not approved, that's why we speak to those families. We're still speaking to them. I'm currently still in contact with a lot of folks. I'm still getting images, videos of what's happening on the ground. But with what you can do in San Diego, because we are expecting 4,000 to 6,000 refugees, there's an excellent NGO that's helping out with transportation or giving like, a little tour of their schools and their community and just making them feel invited. I'll go ahead and post that information right here. And by the way, a lot of the Afghans who are coming into the US, they're really scared of American, especially Caucasians, because of the fear that Trump had instilled in a lot of immigrants. So I can give you a perfect example of a family that came to San Diego when we had, I think, Jewish Family Services. They knocked on their door, and they're one of our excellent NGOs who's been helping out for a very long time. They knocked on the door. The family refused to open the door for them because they were afraid. They thought they're getting deported. This is what they know about America at this point. America deports people in need. So they had to call one of us, and then we had to send an Afghan to go and talk to them for a very long time. It's okay, open the door, let us in. This is an attorney, and they're here. They're the one who got you the apartment, So slowly, they started to open up. But at the end, they even requested, we prefer dealing with Afghans because my kids are not comfortable either. They remember like what happened at the gate. They remember the guns. They remember all these things. We're just not ready to deal with other societies now. Let us recover. But I'll go ahead and post the
Aleena, can you say the name of it? Because I won't be able to access the chat.
Yeah. It's called Afghan Aid.
Thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Michelle. Are there any other questions? Okay, and if not, to say immediately following this meeting there, or pretty quickly afterwards, Kip will send out notes from the meeting with a link, all the links that were posted in the chat. And also, if you're on a laptop or something, you can download the chat. At the bottom of the chat window, there's a ellipsis or those three little dots. Click on that and save the chat, and it will save all the links and the great information that Aleena and Mejgan and Homayra have posted in here. So once again, I want to thank you both, but do stick around because we just in a few minutes of officers' reports, and then we'll get to the candidate speeches as well.